Some folks will like you and some that just won't. Some that stay real and some that just don't. Trying to fit in will only take you so far. You'll never find home trying to change who you are. So don't spend your whole life trying to be what you ain't. You can't hide your heart with a new coat of paint. You think they'll accept you, I promise they can't. So just be who you are, forget what they think. So just be who you are and forget what they think.
Welcome to Vet with a Mic, content driven by veterans issues. So today we are talking to Mia, who is a veteran of the Marine Corps and an artist extraordinaire. Just right off the top, I wanted to thank my buddy Scott, the host of Drive On podcast, for the swag. He sent me a t-shirt in the mail, and I really appreciate that, buddy. But Maria, how you doing? You doing all right?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you about veterans and artists. And
the pleasure is all mine, I assure you. I really do. So let's talk a little bit about your time in the uniform. So in the Marine Corps, obviously, you female Marines are a rare breed for sure. So how long did you spend in?
I was in the Marine Corps for 9 years. I joined right after 9/11. Went to boot camp in 2002, and I got out in 2011.
Okay, so I got out in 2013, so you were just a couple of years before me.
Yeah.
How was the transition for you in 2011?
It wasn't that bad. I mean, I became a fitness instructor once I got out of the Marine Corps. I think it was just, the most comfortable thing to be, because I've always been active and an athlete. Right. So, I was Zumba instructor. Okay. So, I think it kind of eased me into reconnecting because like dancing and endorphins kind of, make you happy. So, at first it wasn't that bad. But then I struggled after it, afterwards.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the struggle. What was your process? What was going on?
So I think it was like a snowball effect, like I said, I deployed to Iraq in 2003. And back then we were in the mentality of don't say anything, right? Especially in the Marine Corps, like,
sure.
I don't know if I can curse, but like they'll be like, you kind of seen as weak if you have any kind of like mental health issues and stuff. Yeah. So you kind of keep your head down and just keep going. You know?
And you're right. Across all the branches, it's almost as if it's a character deficiency if you speak about mental health issues at all.
Right.
We've talked quite a bit about that on this podcast, just about how many times, even if you saw somebody raise their hand and ask for help or to talk to a mental health professional, the command structure was often so knee-jerk that it was just a total overcorrect, and it just sent a chilling effect through the ranks. It was
exactly.
Like, no, well, I just saw what happened to that guy. I'm not saying anything. Right.
That's exactly what happened. Like I was one of my, I think at the time I was a corporal, and one of my sergeants, he asked to be, committed for like a 72-hour hold because he was suicidal. And instead of him getting the support he needed, he got in trouble for it, And so like that was like, well, nobody's saying anything after that,
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that's a lot of times we come with that baggage after the uniform too. We take that into our next job, into our life after, even our interactions with mental health professionals. We can't undo that until we kind of attend to how poisonous that is. Because it really is. It undermines your faith in the process because you feel as if there's going to be reprisals against you if you talk about needing help about something.
And I think it's also because you're trained to be like strong, you're trained to like overcome obstacles, you're trained to like you get the job done no matter what, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think like for me personally, that's what happened. I got out of the Marines and I still kind of like life just took over, you know. I became a stay-at-home mom. My twins were
Yeah.
born in 2013. So I went from like teaching like 16, 18 fitness classes a week, being very active, to being at home with two newborn babies.
Yeah.
And I think like in hindsight, when I think back, I think I was suffering from postpartum depression.
Sure.
But I never allowed myself the grace to ask for help or even admit it to myself, right? Because
Yeah.
my Marine mentality was like, well, no crap. You have two
Yeah.
newborn babies at home. Of course you're gonna be feeling this way. Of course you're
Yeah.
gonna, you know what I mean? And so I just forced myself to keep going through. So
And obviously I don't have a frame of reference for that, but I can just tell you what the mental health literature says is that a lot of times women also feel as if they're a bad mother then.
right.
Like, oh man, I'm a shitty mom already if I'm feeling this way about having my kid, and there's some pretty complicated feelings that go on with postpartum, and it doesn't do a lot for your self-esteem. The unfortunate thing is that it's an interaction between mother and child too. So mom feels depressed, and the child, she inadvertently kind of retreats from the child. And what does the child do? Cry out for more attention from mom, and so it's just a cycle that kind of happens that makes both parts of the equation interact differently. So let me ask you this though: how old were you in 2003?
When I deployed to Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
I was 22. I turned
22.
23 in Iraq.
Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned that because we're talking about something years later that is still impacting you. And we're pretty young, 22, 23. I mean, I know that we consider that still to be an adult, but I know me at 22, 23, I didn't have a clue. I thought I did, but I did not have a clue. And I just wondered if that had anything to do with your 2011 story with as a new mother. I mean, you're talking about something that's at this point a decade old, you know?
Yeah, like now I'm at a point in my life where I've been able to kind of like dissect my journey. Um it's taken me almost a year of therapy to be able to
Right.
like really process the whole thing. But it's been if for my 40 years I've had a very like trauma filled life.
Sure.
Um I was born in Peru, and the
Right.
reason why we migrated to the United States is because at the time, my country was overrun with terrorists, and my dad was part of the military there, and they had like life threats on his life, our life. I mean, there was car bombs.
Was that the communist revolution? Am I thinking correctly there?
So there were two separate groups. There
Oh,
was two
okay.
separate terroristic groups in Peru that were fighting each other, and they were fighting the government. So it was like a massacre. Like there were kidnappings, there were
Yeah.
assassinations, there were car bombs everywhere.
Yeah.
It was like a really bad.
Sure.
Um, and so that's how I kind of started my years of memory, like where you could really remember things. Um, and coming here to this country, like, I adopted America as my new home, right? So when 9/11 happened, it triggered something in me because I
Yeah.
was like, well, this was supposed to be the place where we're safe. And now
Right.
it's happening again. But then I was old enough where I felt like I could protect my family. And that's why I decided to join the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a snowball effect, even from when I was only 12, right?
Yeah.
And then I get deployed to Iraq, and then like that was on top of my prior, um, memories of trauma.
Yeah.
And so
Sure.
when the babies were born, I think my cup was like half, or maybe even like, you know,
I'm
more than half
glad I'm
full.
glad you used that metaphor cup, right? So for those of you who are watching the video, right? I'm going to use this as an analogy, right? So if this cup is our mental health, right? There is a certain level of liquid that we are born with, right? So maybe it's genetic contributions from mom and from dad. Maybe they have a tendency to be depressed and or all the other different mental health disorders that are out there. You may have a genetic vulnerability and we inherit that, right? And so our liquid may be at a certain level of our cup, right? So then after that happens, because it's an interaction, the environment pours in liquid on top of our cup. And so depending upon where our liquid level started, it may take a lot of environmental pour in to cause spillover, which the spillover is disorder. And or if you were born with quite a bit of liquid before the environment started pouring into your cup, then it's not going to take a lot. But it sounds like what you're describing is you were getting a lot of liquid poured into your cup from the environment from the very jump.
Right.
So a lot of times, a reason why I mentioned that's called the diathesis stress model. Is a lot of times guys and gals that are in the uniform, they go and they have experiences in Iraq or Afghanistan, and they don't understand why they develop PTSD or depression or anxiety symptoms, and people in their unit don't. Well, it just depends on what your cup level started at and what you're taking into the uniform with you. And since a lot of us come from pretty economically disadvantaged backgrounds, we're looking to change our station in life. We most of the time take our cup is filled with environmental liquid already, but I just wanted to kind of clear up that from the psychological perspective. So we're going back to your cup with your babies being half full.
Yeah, no, that was a perfect analogy. I love that. I love that you pointed out the elephant in the room, that
Mm,
most military people already come in with the
yeah,
disadvantage.
yeah,
So that was great. Yeah, but so then when the babies were in, like it, I mean, I moved to New York when I got married. I moved to New
mm,
York, and so I was in a new environment. I have no help. Like my family was here in New Jersey. Um, my husband worked the whole day, so it was just
mm,
all on me.
yeah,
And I think, and I on top of that, I had medical issues because of the pregnancy. It was
yeah,
really like hard with them, so it just snowballed into
yeah,
everything. um but even then I still didn't ask for help because I'm a Marine. Like, you put your head down and you just keep going, right?
yeah.
um
I mean, what's the tagline? Pain is weakness, leaving the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Pain's weakness.
Mhm.
So, okay, you're just getting stronger. You're just getting stronger. It wasn't really until 2015 when my dad, we almost lost him.
Mm,
We He had an internal bleed. We didn't know at the time, but he had a tumor and it ruptured and he was bleeding internally and we almost lost him.
yeah.
And it wasn't until that moment that I think everything just kind of, like, my cup spilled over, right? Because
Yeah.
my dad is my rock. Like, he is
Sure.
my my compass in life. And
Yeah.
then the having almost lost him, I think that's when everything was just like, okay. And that's when I started having the panic attacks and the anxiety attacks and things like that.
Mm,
So, but I think it was a snowball of everything,
yeah.
when my body started shutting down because I wasn't taking care of my mind.
Yeah.
And it forced me to pay attention. It forced me to swallow that pill and be like, okay.
Yeah. Because the body eventually will start manifesting symptoms too.
Yep.
Yeah.
The body
And
keeps the score.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So are you familiar with that book?
I love
Yeah.
that book. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great, in case those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it's, trauma, the body keeps the score. And it's written by an MD who has done just one of the most prolific researchers in trauma.
Mhm.
So if you get a chance to check that book out, I would strongly encourage you to. But, to go back to these things are kind of cumulative in nature, right? Stress is, if one thing could happen in isolation, it would be one thing, but it's never that way. The system, we call it allostatic load, right? And so everybody's system eventually meets a fracture point. And that's kind of what you're describing is as more things happen, the stress continues to kind of just keep score, so to speak, and the system becomes overwhelmed. Now, there's this beautiful explanation, a hypothesis, and it's called the kindling hypothesis, or the stress desensitization hypothesis, in which one can experience a significant stressor. I don't know, like being in Iraq, right? And so it is severe enough to maybe cause some mental health issues. But then something unexpected happens. After that, the next stressor doesn't have to be as severe to maintain the stress response. Matter of fact, it kind of falls across repeated stressors. So you have this one that can be really intense, and then every single time after that, it's just like a death of 1,000 cuts. It's just a little smaller and smaller and smaller. And I don't think that we realize that within our military culture, because we come in this, I made it through, I'm fine. But we're still dealing with the residual effects of it. Sorry, I just wanted to tag in there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what happened. And I think my saving grace was I had my first child the year after I came back from Iraq. So she anchored me, she gave me a reason, she gave me purpose to kind of pull myself out, like I'm like by my bootstraps sort of.
Yeah.
And like I said, she kind of realigned me,
Yeah.
But my pregnancy with the twins was very traumatic. I was in the hospital. It was really hard. So I think that's when, again,
Yeah.
things started piling back up again. So
yeah, the system can only handle so much. That's why we talk so much about being connected to others and practicing good self-care. And I know that that's not what we call it here, self-care, but just finding things to do that add to your life, that kind of take from the cup, so to speak, which is why you're actually here. That's a perfect segue. Is you have found a really just, dare I say, beautiful way of taking liquid from your cup, and that's through your artistic expressions. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've always instinctively gravitated to art making to help me process life. I'm not a person that I used to not be able to talk, openly about my emotions and my feelings. And so I've always just dumped myself into art making. Even when I was in Iraq, I still have a sketchbook, sometimes in the quiet moments or stuff like that. But it wasn't until my twins went back to school that, I had all this free time on my hands. I'm like, what am I going to do? And right at that time, one of my corporals committed suicide. And it really hit me hard because I had spoken to him the week before. And not once did he say, hey, I'm feeling this way. I need help, nothing, not a clue. None of us knew. It was it took us by surprise. And I don't know. And it triggered me. I was like, we have to do something, we're our brother's keepers, our sister's keepers, So I decided to go back to school for art therapy. And that's what I got my degree on. Because I knew instinctively that it helps. I just wanted to understand the psychology behind it and the clinical aspect behind it, right?
Yeah.
So when I went back to school, Ceramics 101 was a required course for my degree. And I walked into the studio, I, touched the mud, and I was like, oh, I'm home. I'm never leaving again. So it was the one medium I found that I could really express myself with. And I think because I'm such a I'm a very sentient person.
Yeah.
The clay is a really good medium to be able to have somatic release.
Yeah. So you enjoy the tactile, the
Yeah.
touch. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And clay is a medium that it requires you to really be present fully,
Mm,
all five senses, right?
yeah.
Because it's wet. It has a certain like earthy smell.
Mm,
It's demanding. It's not a easy medium to work with when you're beginning. So it forces you to focus right away. So in like the first 10 minutes, you're in flow.
right.
Um,
So now you use the word flow.
right.
So obviously, now if you have an art therapy background, is flow the same word that I usually think of? Because flow in our clinical literature is when you kind of are so engrossed in something
Yep.
that you kind of just time even disappears, and
Yep.
it's difficult enough to maintain your attention, but that's where people feel a real sense of profound joy, is whenever they're doing something that's has an intrinsic motivation, intrinsic joy.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I mean. It's like you get elevated into that void in your head where like nothing else matters but that
Mm,
present moment. And like for me, I think that's when it clicked because it was in those states of flow that I was able to process my own trauma and
mm,
have conversations with my own self, and just kind of like sit in the stillness and because a lot of times I feel like when we're on hyper independent mode, we tend to shut off our voices that are telling us like, hey, I need help, hey,
mm,
I'm not doing so good, right? But you don't
yeah.
like to hear that, so you kind of quiet them down. But it's when that moment where you're like in the stillness that those voices kind of start
Mm,
talking to you louder a little bit,
yeah.
and then you get to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, I know I'm gonna get Jungian on you, but like it's a lot of shadow work.
Well, honestly, I am, the psychoanalytic, or, the Freudian, just general perspective is a mixed bag for me. But that's one of the things that I actually do like about Jung, is this idea of a shadow side. Because I think that's one of the things that veterans specifically need to attend to, because we don't want everybody wants to pretend like they're a great person, right? And they're not capable of doing this, that, or the other, right? But the truth of the matter is we're capable of doing some pretty bad things too.
Yeah.
But that's a part of us. That's a hand. And to try to cut off a part of your body is foolish. The only way to true psychological health, according to Jung, was to integrate that and to attend to it and understand that this is just as much of a part of you as a hand, right? So to try to get rid of it is counterproductive to your existence. And the only way to truly be actualized is to take the bright side, if you will, and the dark side, the shadow side, and to just blend them together into a mixture of who you are. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I fully embrace the concept of duality, right?
Mm,
Like your light, your positivity cannot exist without your darkness, right?
yeah.
It's not physically or spiritually or anything possible.
Yeah.
I think the the key would be to find that balance, like that, where you could address the dark emotions, the anger, the fear, the all the things that are considered shadow work.
Yeah.
Sit with them, feel them, process them, and then release them back, right? Because that's not a good state to be in, so that you could always find a level state.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's a couple different points there that kind of key up with me. Is in our culture, just the American culture, we're fixated on being happy. We're fixated on positive emotions. We try to make those things permanent fixtures in our lives. And then we try to pretend like being sad or being angry, these negative emotional states that we consider, we appraise as being negative, like we try to reject those as even, oh, sorry, I got mad. Well, was there a reason you got mad? Where was it justified for you to get mad? And when you do that, you're like in the Buddhist tradition, you are trying to constrain something that is meant to be transient in nature. You're trying to hold on to something positive longer than it's meant to be. And you're trying to force yourself not to feel certain things. And that causes distress on both sides. You can't not attend to negative emotions. You got to be sad. You got to be angry if the situation calls for it. But you just got to remember those things are transient too. They come and go. It's all right to be angry. Just 30 seconds or 5 minutes of anger, just let it go. It's a part of life. Emotions are transient.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's definitely the consumer society that we have, that they sell you happy pills, right?
Hmm.
Like the and it's such a idolized version of happiness, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because like if you're not like you're traveling and you have the love of your life and you should look like this and you should have,
yeah,
but technically really what is happiness? I feel like happiness should really be a state of peace, right?
yeah.
We associate happiness with like extreme pleasure and
Like
instant
hedonism. Yeah,
gratification,
yeah. Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, and I hate to keep mentioning the Happy Trap episode, but that was one of the things we talked about is people who are actually happy, they have high senses of well-being. And just to kind of get back to your artwork, they do a lot of flow. What they do is they do a lot of things that make them, they have an intrinsic sense of joy from. They express a lot of gratitude to others in their lives, and they feel connected to other people. And all of that, of course, and there is a professional goal element of that too. They feel as if they're working something in their profession that they consider to be a worthwhile goal. But those things are kind of the things that circle what we conceive as happy, but is actually well-being. And I try to tell people, look, to kind of go back to comparing it to the ideal, right? Is if you're thinking that something has to be perfect for you to be happy, well, you're robbed of the happiness that you're going to have in that moment because nothing's ever going to be perfect, right? And then whenever you're in a low spot, guess what? You're still comparing it to that idealized standard. So it feels even worse because you know that you're not making that mark by an even greater margin. So it's just funny that when you mention that, that's the first thing that I pops into my head is, yeah, when you're trying to compare this perfection standard, it robs you of just the everyday ups and downs of life because it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah. And also when you start comparing yourself to the person next to you, or I should be where they are. They're my same age. Like we did this. It's like that to me is the biggest rob of happiness, when you're comparing yourself and your progress and your journey and life to others. Like we are all experiencing our own, you know, journey, and our own timing is different,
Yeah.
Um
Didn't Teddy Roosevelt say that comparison is the thief of joy?
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it was Teddy. Well, it's been attributed to Teddy, so I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about your art because I think that's really cool. Those of you who are watching the video, you can see one of her works behind her left shoulder. Had to double check. I'm a sailor, man. Got to make sure my left from right.
Left, right, where's it
Yeah.
going?
Port starboard. Yeah. So obviously we talked a little bit before we started recording about what the inspiration was for that particular piece. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this is part of a 12 sculpture exhibit. It was my first solo exhibit. Um, and this is the called Balance Warrior. I kind of, so for this exhibit, I have to kind of break it down a little bit, but I basically dissected my life and I made a sculpture for every chapter of my life that like had a huge impact, whether it was positive or negative. And it went back to my childhood in Peru, to being an immigrant girl, being
Yeah.
thrown into school with the dictionary because I couldn't speak English,
Right.
to the Marine Corps, to being deployed to Iraq, like just kind of all my stations that
Yeah.
shaped me very strongly, right?
Right.
And this sculpture, I feel, is like the culmination of all my myselfs put together. And where I'm finally comfortable not seeing so much with my eyes, but like with my senses, you know. And I try to really listen with my heart and my brain.
Yeah.
I try to make educated decisions based on facts and research and, you know, psychological, again, clinical backends.
Right.
But I'm also very led by my heart and my emotions and my instincts and like my gut feeling.
Yeah.
I'm an empath, so I get to like, I feel a lot of the energy around me. And so like I always felt like I had to be either or. And now I've been able to really embrace both sides, you know?
You know, that's interesting. And I want to say something about that, but at first I want to say what my first impression was whenever you first revealed that to me, which I didn't share with you at the time, because I don't know, maybe this is a Freudian in me, right? And I don't mean to project anything on your particular art, but to me, that looks like a warrior.
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was accurate in that. And so now that makes it even more relevant to me to know that the duality of the brain and the heart, because how often as a warrior do you feel conflicted along those lines, right?
Yeah.
You know what you have to do, but there's this internal, but should I? Or what's the ramifications of? There's just, like I said, that duality of an internal and an internal pull between those two parts of yourself or your identity. So I'm glad I'm on the level there. So that's
No,
great.
yeah. And
That means it's great art, by the way, when people
oh, thank you.
can
Thank
discern
you.
that. Maybe I'm just giving myself too much credit.
No, but that's exactly, and this is
Yeah.
why I was telling you before that that's why I like creating surreal art, because
Yeah.
then I like to hear what it invokes in the, you know, the person that is seeing it, and how you feel, and like tell me like what's it talking to you, what it's telling you, right? It is a warrior. I was born in a little small city in Peru that was one of the few cities that fought against the Incas and they couldn't conquer us. So like I like to tell that I come from a warrior lineage, right? But one of my favorite quotes is, "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener at war," right? And so like I always try to lead with that I know I'm capable of being strong. I know I'm capable of violence, right?
Yeah.
I'm capable of rage. I'm capable of coming out to the world with fury. But just because I can do it doesn't mean I have to lead that way, right?
Man, you know, have you ever heard of Jordan Peterson, which he's a little controversial, but he talks about those who basically that there was a misrepresentation of the Bible verse, the meek shall inherit the earth. He said that it was actually more something to akin of those who have swords but choose to keep them sheathed, right? Which is a totally different interpretation, if that is the accurate one, right? Is that those people who are capable of doing things but choose not to,
Right.
because I mean that is the ultimate test of your mastery over yourself and of the environment, of knowing that you're capable of doing something but choosing a different path.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I always say,
yeah.
like I want to lead myself. Like I always say, lead with love, right? Like it's easy, especially now that we're so divided and everything is so political and it's, you know, you against us and them against us. Like it's easy to respond to someone in anger, right? But if you can get down to their level and try to understand where they're coming from and have the empathy to see it from their point of view, I think things, you know, are a little bit more easier to process. But it's not always easy, right? Because sometimes, especially when you're being triggered or if it pushes one of your buttons, it's easy to just yell at them or respond. So, but I'm trying to be conscious of that, and always in the way I present to the world, I try to treat people the way I would want to be treated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I mean, and that is profound. Trying to take somebody else's perspective is really hard. It truly is. But I think things like art teach that skill, or at least it's an exercise of it. Because if you can put yourself into some headspace of what do you think the artist was really in meaning with this work or with this song, whatever the medium is, I think that allows a person to practice a perspective that is not their own, because it's something that's really difficult for people generally, but just veterans specifically, because there's a great saying, and it came from David Byrne's book, Feeling Better, right? And it's a metaphor, and it goes a little bit like this: on the topic of lunch, the lion and the lamb have two very different perspectives of what fare is.
right.
Right. So, and I remember the first time I read that, I was like, man, isn't that some hot shit, man? God. Right. Because I fancy myself a lion at times. I do. And a lot of times whenever I would get angry about something, yeah, I had a misunderstanding about the nature of the world. First, who the hell is going to think about what's fair to me? They're thinking about what's fair to them. And they're not thinking as if they're intentionally being unfair to you. That's just their perspective. Is the lamb thinks that a salad is lunch, and obviously the lion does not. And I think once we start having these unrealistic expectations from other people and from the world, we set ourselves up to walk into these traps, to be angry, to be upset, to be sad about things, because we have expectations from the world that are not realistic.
And I think we're more susceptible to as a collective to be guided and steered in one way or the other. And a lot of times it's not even we're the ones affected by it, and not the
Yeah.
people moving the puppets around. So
Yeah. And like I said, I just remember everyday interactions with people that, because we all, let's just say that to use something of a similar cultural vein to your background, machismo, right? Like veterans have a certain hot bloodedness to them, right? And as soon as, and I'm speaking generally, not all of us are like that, I get it, but there's a reason why we went into the military. We are warriors at our base elements. But sometimes it's difficult for us to remember that out in the world, that we're sometimes walking amongst gardeners, and we can't only see our perspective as the only right one, right? Is that it takes gardeners as well as warriors to keep the world spinning. Otherwise, I mean, you're out of balance, so to speak.
it's I love that you kind of lead into this, because that is the reason why I founded Claymore Vets. And the reason why I picked Claymore is obviously it has to do with clay, and I'm a ceramic artist, but Claymore is a nomenclature that every veteran knows, right? It blows crap up, right? It destroys.
You can say shit, man. It doesn't
Okay,
matter.
good, because I'm trying to hold myself back. Okay.
Yeah. I know.
It, like, it destroys, right? And that's the perspective that civilians have of veterans, that we are reactive, we're explosive, anything we touch, we break families, we break everything, right? And so I want to shift that paradigm, that veterans, like you said, we were trained to be these war machines, these killing machines, right? Because the military did their job damn well, and they tapped into our warrior senses, right? And they just upped that to 110%, right? So they trained us to be mission ready, being okay with killing somebody else, taking someone else's life for the mission, right?
Yeah.
They disconnect our emotional cables, because that makes us weak. You can't think about your family. You can't think about the moral or ethic injury of taking someone else's life because I need you to do your job, right?
Well, I would even say that, look, when the time comes for action, that half a second between you going, "Oh," that can get you killed.
Right.
And intense interactions, which I have
Exactly.
to just say that 85% of us don't have those type of interactions. Only 15% are in quote unquote combat arms, and only about 15% of those have had those experiences. So just with that in mind,
But
but yeah,
even if you didn't have that, you made a conscious decision that you are ready to do it
I,
if you were ever met with it.
I don't often speak of things that I experienced in the uniform, because that with the mic's not really about me.
Right.
But you're right. When the time comes, if you don't commit to that action already completely in your heart, so to speak, the time for the deed, when the brain must act, you'll freeze.
Right. And I
And
think that
so,
yeah,
in your head, in your body, your brain, your mind, you have to. That person has already, they cease to exist already.
right.
And if you don't, then when it comes time to squeeze the trigger, so to speak, you'll freeze. And
Exactly.
so I think that the military has that in mind. They know that it's mission first. Yes, they're trying to tell you to kind of segment that part of yourself, but there is an actual function to it that is life-saving in some of those in those more intense interactions. So, I mean, I guess it's like most things, like it's good and bad.
Right.
There's positives and negatives to it.
But even then, like and it's such a juxtaposition because they're making you be okay with taking someone else's life if it means that you'll save your brother's life,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Like it's okay to sacrifice yourself and kill somebody else because you're serving someone else, right?
yeah,
But so but my gripe with this is that it takes them 13 weeks to make us this disconnected robots, right? When we come out of service, there's no retraining us back. There's no
mm,
reconnecting us to our humanity. There's
yeah,
no, like walking orders that, hey, you can feel now. You can love your family. You can connect to people around you, right? You don't
mm,
have to be so isolated. You don't have to be so rigid because you're done, right? You drop your
yeah,
backpack, go back to being a human.
yeah,
There's no reconnecting us. Um,
yeah,
and that's where I feel that work like what I'm trying to accomplish with Claymore Vets
hmm,
is that reconnection, is that platform to be able to bring your walls down and reconnect to another human being.
mm,
And for me, artists are the best ambassadors on the welcoming committee of the civilian side
mm,
because they're visionaries, right? And most
mm,
artists create from emotion, from within, and they can see past the present. They look into the future. They see the whole big picture, right?
yeah,
And and I've experienced this as an artist myself, but in the workshops that we have, where veterans are more at ease because the artwork itself acts as a medium, as a portal,
mm,
right? So because they're so concentrated on working with this that their inhibitions get lowered and then they
yeah,
can connect again, right? Like I had we had a partnership with the Samaritan Village. It's a program where veterans that have been suffering with substance abuse or like they're being
mm,
incarcerated or something like that, and then they get into this program for a whole year. But it's resident, like they live in the facilities, and
mm,
then the first 6 months is like like boot camp, kind of retraining them, everything. The last 6 months is reintegrating them to society,
yeah,
and then they do like resume training or stuff like that. And then they would get bused to my studio and we would do workshops with them, right? We had this one guy who he was really frustrated working with the wheel one of the times, and because it's very hard, it's very demanding. You have to really like center yourself. You can't be too strong, you can't be too weak, right? And he got mad and he like threw it and kicked off. One of my volunteers, she happened to be a speech speech therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's really trained and capable of handling a difficult, population.
Yeah.
She went out, she talked to him or whatever, she brought him back in. Long story, that day he ended up making 3 bowls, right? They were a little lopsided, a little lumpy, but still made them, right? So few workshops ahead, we glazed them, everything. The day of, they came to pick up their stuff. And he was so excited. He was so proud of himself. And he's like, oh my God, look what I made. He's like, now I can have cereal with my daughter while we watch cartoons on a Saturday morning. So like, he went from being so angry and he didn't even want to participate to looking forward to reconnecting to his kid that he hasn't seen in 3 years because of his substance abuse. Right.
Yeah.
And he was proud. And it was like something I did. Like, I can connect with my family. And then that's when I'm like, I started crying because I'm like a crybaby. And I was like, this is why I do this.
Careful, you'll lose your Marine card.
Yeah. No, the Marine card's gone. Everyone was like crying. I'm like.
So, it's funny. We talk a lot about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, on this show. And there's 3 ways in which Viktor Frankl says that you find meaning in life after, well, he was speaking of his life after the Holocaust, but he says you can find meaning in life in 3 ways: contending with a worthwhile goal, connecting with other people, and using a creative spirit, right? And the thing is that those 3 things may appear on its surface to be separate, but they're all the same thing that we're describing. It's the same concept, the same construct, because whenever you do things like of the creative spirit, when you're out making bowls, right? You're thinking about how this makes you connected to another human being. You're connected to the people who are helping you learn how to do it. There are so many ways in which those 3, contending with a worthwhile goal, connecting with others, and creative spirits, all just become a synergistic interaction that really moves you towards profound meaning in life. So that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you because you were on Scott's The Drive On podcast, and he actually mentioned you in the episode. And so it's funny. It was maybe like a couple of days after that, you reached out, and I was like, oh, I know who this is. Yeah, I'm putting 2 and 2 together. Because I think that's opportunities like Claymore Vets. That's what you're doing. You're providing people an opportunity to find meaning in life again after the uniform. And of course, it's brought meaning in life to your own life. But and it's just something that I think that we need to do more as a community, is to kind of going back to being a keeper of our brothers and sisters. We need to establish more opportunities for community in life after the uniform, because I think that's what we miss the most, is the camaraderie and the feeling connected to the military culture.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think anyone you ask, we don't miss the BS. We don't need, the rules and everything. You miss the people that it's so hard, because never in your life can you trust another human being with your life, right? But in the service, it's ingrained. Like, you trust people with your life. And when you come into the civilian world, it's so isolating to not feel it again, right? And I think for me, that's like the biggest component.
Yeah.
To just reconnect our cables, and also just to shift the paradigm, because even as a society, what do they call, like, toxic masculinity, right? Like, you can't be like, a man can't cry. Why? Is he not human? Is he not, does he not have emotions? Like, right? So it's just like deconstructing all these
Yeah.
like paradigms that we got built with that are just hindering us from really like living our like highest self, you know?
Yeah. Let me ask you. Um, Obviously, being a woman who has served, we've talked about some of the issues, even on other episodes, of just some of the rub up against that kind of happen. And I just wanted to speak to this because we've talked about duality, having two separate identities, one of a veteran and then of a minority status. But you're coming from as somebody who actually grew up, at least for the first 12 years, right? In another culture, in another country. Did you notice a strain coming out of the uniform? Because all of a sudden now your Latina-ness or your Peruvian-ness mattered again? Because in the uniform, it really doesn't.
Right. I don't I think it does it adds a certain layer of invisibility
Mm,
being a civilian again, right?
yeah.
Especially being a Marine, because like I'm such a girly and like so
Yeah.
happy go lucky that I'm not like that stern Marine that like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not knife handing people across. So like it's
Yeah.
like layers and layers of me having to like present my identity.
Yeah.
Um it, it has come up. They're like, oh, for example, the other day I met another veteran in the community, and I'm the oldest of three girls, right?
Mm,
And so the Latin family dynamics, especially with women, are still a little outdated, I think,
oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, well, what did your dad say? Like,
Oh, I see.
you
Yeah.
you joined the Marines like that, but it was going to like, well, girls should be in the kitchen, like, you shouldn't
Mm,
be out in the fighting a
yeah.
gun
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I think my poor dad just it took him a little bit, even though he was in the military himself. I think
Mm,
having his oldest girl be like, well, this is what I want to do, right? And even my own family, I had a little bit of a fallback, especially in Peru, because they're still very old school, and
mm.
women should have been doing this kind of thing. That I feel like I was the black sheep of my family, that I came to be like, this is where we're gonna stop
Yeah.
all this mentality.
Uh,
Um,
So let me ask you this: do they have, because a previous episode as well, we talked to Irving, and he is of Dominican descent, and he was like, Latinos, we don't talk about mental health. We don't talk
oh
about it at all.
no,
Like
at
he
all.
said that, and of course he has battled depression at several points in his life. He's like, yeah, Latinos, we don't talk about it.
No, we don't. That is a big taboo. Like,
Yeah.
it's so weird. Latinos are so our our culture is so weird, because there's so many things you don't talk about, but then behind closed doors,
Mm.
it's like the huge elephant in the room. But like,
Yeah.
you throw like the blanket over it, and it's like, hey, let's
That's
forget
not
about it.
there. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not
we're
there.
not
Yeah.
seeing it.
Yeah.
Like, let's party. It's not
Mm.
there. Um, and even and to add another layer to this, being an immigrant family,
Yeah.
right? Coming from an immigrant parent, it's like it's so hard to not feel like you are not living up to their expectations and
Mm.
their dreams and their strength, right? When you're talking about like, I have depression, I need to go to therapy,
Yeah.
right? Because in their right mind, I mean, they could have been depressed. I can't even imagine coming to a country with your family and not being able to speak English, and here you are now. You're responsible for this whole family. I think I'd be depressed myself, but I don't got the luxury, right,
Yeah.
to take some time off. So I
Yeah.
think they're built that we can't do it. You
Mm.
can't do it, right? You
Yeah.
can't take a knee, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
No, and to your point, yeah, you're right. And I think that there's, especially when you're talking about people who are in your position, being first generation, like you have to walk between being an American and being Peruvian,
Yeah.
between your mom and dad's culture, and then the culture you have to go through in the school. So there's all these external pressures that you have to kind of navigate through, and you may just be so used to them that they're just kind of running in the background for you because you grew up like that. But I know that some people have talked about just how frustrating it is to, because Americans, generally speaking, don't realize, for example, how many Latinos are in the uniform, and there are a ton of Latinos in the uniform. Especially, I know that things may look different according to rank or job, but there is a great amount of diversity in our uniform, and I don't think a lot of Americans realize that. And so then they walk up to people who have served, and then they, well, stick their foot in their mouth by saying something asinine like, "Oh, you served? Or, oh, yeah, okay. Like, where'd you get that sweatshirt? Did your boyfriend give that to you?" And they just don't realize how diverse the military experience is, and those images that they have of them in their head, which is often me, a guy who looks like me, a big bald white dude with a beard and a sleeve tattoo. That's what they think we all look like. And then they see like lovely people like yourself sitting there, and they're like, "Oh, actually, I'm a Marine. Thank you." And
Right.
that conflicts with their view of what they think our uniform looks like.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's one of the um big drives for me, is just to like open up the platform for people to, to see
Yeah.
that we have a diversity, and be
Mhm.
inclusive, and even look, for I served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, right? And I got
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
before it was okay, right? So
Yeah.
I don't even myself, I have like this preconceived idea of what the military is, because that was my experience, right? So now when I think about like a sergeant major that has a husband, right? It takes me a little bit, and I'm being honest, like listen, I love my alphabet people, but like it takes you a little bit to get your mentality to like process that, right? And I think that's,
Maybe it's a sailor in me. I don't
oh
know.
man, I don't listen, I don't know.
But
You say
no, I mean, like I just, because I was in from 2008 to 2013.
oh, but you
So
were there when it already,
yeah, right.
yeah,
But so for me, it was everybody knew who was gay and who wasn't. It never was.
right. No,
It was never. I don't know. It was such a silly policy anyway, because everybody knew who was gay and who was straight. And I honestly, shout out to my lesbian sisters out there, man. Like whenever I asked them to help me do a task, I never caught any flack from them. They were going, "I don't need your help to do it," right? So
right, right.
I we all knew these things about living in the uniform, and I make the joke about the Navy because we always get ribbed about being a little bit more
The YMCA.
flexible. Yeah, there you go. But no, but to your point, as I didn't really, I was kind of just like, well, duh, yeah. I mean, everybody knew who was gay and who wasn't, and
I don't
maybe
know.
that's my own naiveness. I maybe in the uniform, I just, because I don't really see it that way. I didn't see anybody even give a shit about it. I didn't see anybody being like, "Oh, screw that dude, he's gay." I never saw any of that. And I know it happens. So, my brothers and sisters who are same sex oriented listening, please do not hear that as me dismissing your stories, because I know that those kind of things happen. But from the majority, I would say I kind of was like, "Yeah, it's cool, whatever." Like, I don't have a problem. Yeah, you're married to a woman, you're married to a guy. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, I really think it has to do also with the timing, right?
Mm,
Like the older school generation of
mm.
military people, and I mean even me, I'm not even that old school, but even when I served, they weren't,
As
allowed to
accommodating. Yeah,
openly,
yeah,
you know, and especially in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has, I and I love my Marines, but a lot of them have a very, very toxic mentality when it comes to things like that. They're not very
yeah.
open minded. you know.
But yet they do some of the most homoerotic
I
things.
know that's the craziest thing. Just listen, when you're, it's not, you know, it's not bad if you're drunk or deployed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
funny.
but my
Yeah.
whole point to that is that, like, it's just teaching them, right? Opening up the conversations to be able to raise your awareness, right? It's just the same thing, like how they didn't know or they don't feel comfortable. They're just like minority veterans. It's the same thing as like, here's a
Yeah.
new whole world.
Yeah.
It's because you weren't exposed to it. It does not mean that it's not exist, kind of thing. You
Yeah.
know?
Which, not that you would know this, but I grew up in a small town in East Tennessee, right? So whenever I left my little small corner of the universe, whoa, man, did I just get exposed to so much of the world. Like, I met people from Peru, and I met people from, different parts of the country, and who had just completely different lived experiences than I did. And once you see those things, you can't go back. I make this point all the time. Once you've been to Oz, Kansas never looks the same. It just
Right.
doesn't. And I think just exposure to certain things makes them less threatening. And maybe that was it. As soon as everybody was like, yeah, I'm getting married to my husband next month, as soon as it started happening, it became normal. Everybody went, all right.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever.
Exactly.
It's like, first time you see somebody who's of Asian descent and you've never seen an Asian person growing up in the middle of Iowa, which is what one of my buddies, like, he had never seen a black person before in real life. And then his roommate in A school, which they were best buddies for the rest of their time in the uniform, his best buddy was from Harlem, right?
Oh
So it
my
was like an
God.
episode of The Odd Couple to see these two, and they were like best of buddies. And but no, they had never. I almost said his name. He had never had an interaction with somebody of a minority status like that. But as soon as he realized, oh shit, man, you're just like me. You see how much humanity there is in the experience, period. And I think that's just kind of what happens, whether it's same-sex orientation or race or even religions. As soon as you expose to things, you're like, that's not as threatening anymore. You
Right.
understand that they're just people trying to live their lives.
Right. Yeah, once we get past the labels, you know,
Yeah.
and they're like self-imposed labels.
Yeah.
By who? Religion and groups that want to control us socially. So,
Yeah, I
right?
always thought it was funny. I said the only thing that ever mattered to me, who puts what where, what color they are, or who they pray to, no, doesn't matter. Just don't let me die here. That's it. That's the
Right?
only.
I gotta get home, man.
That's it. It's just, it's cool. You watch my back, I'll watch your
Yeah.
back. I don't care
Like
if you think I'm.
Mattis said,
Yeah,
he's like, listen, as long as you can pull the trigger, I don't care who you sleep
yeah,
with.
yeah.
Right?
Right. I don't care if you think I'm hot, man. It's cool. Just
Right.
hell, don't let me die here. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. But is there anything else you'd like to cover while we're here up against an hour?
No, well, I mean, you guys can find us so we're Claymore Vets across all social medias. Our website is claymorevets.org. We're having a lot of exhibits and events planned for this year. Hopefully COVID will stay away so that we
Yeah.
don't keep getting canceled. But other than that, and just if anyone's listening and you want to give yourself, just try some art. It doesn't have to be clay.
Yeah.
Any creative endeavor, music, writing, painting. Just find the one thing that sparks your soul and makes you feel alive. And I think that's when you start seeing the flip, of being on like a low valley, and then you start climbing back up. So
Yeah. You know what's funny? I always just say, because I play the guitar rather poorly, I just say, pick something to suck a little less at every day.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, check her out on all the Instagrams. Obviously, at the bottom of the ticker, you can see there, if you're watching the video, it's Claymore_Vets is where you can find their organization. Are you guys a 501c3?
Yes.
All right. So there you go. All profits are going outward into the community. They are a non-profit charity organization.
And
So
also, I just forgot one thing. If you're a veteran artist and you're looking for platforms to exhibit, we hold exhibits, twice or three times a year, and we're always looking to highlight new artists. So if you want to send us an email or DM,
Yeah,
for sure.
for sure. Yeah. So there you go. All right. So we have had Mia here on this episode of Vet with a Mic. If you have enjoyed the content in which we have created and the conversation in which we covered a little bit of everything, and you feel as if there was somebody out there that would enjoy hearing this conversation, please do us a favor, spread the word, because largely we can't do what we're doing here without the kindness of others in helping spread the message here at Vet with a Mic. So, and in saying that as well, if there's a particular episode that you would like to see have happen here on Vet with a Mic, or there's an interview that you would just really love to see, send me an email, drop me a line, find me on the social medias, let me know anything I can do to help facilitate whatever episodes you guys want to see. And in saying that, also remember the Q&A episode is still taking questions. So just as a light little reminder, I am not giving anybody professional advice on questions that they write into about mental health issues. And obviously, whatever questions you have for me, it's going to be anonymous. I'm not going to put out your business. You don't have to worry about me telling everybody about who said what and what question content. Okay. So in saying that, as we always end the show with, however life finds you, I hope life finds you well. Till next time.